Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this session. I am Neha Kapnish and I am going to be moderating the session today. Today, I have great privilege in introducing one of India's most renowned HR leaders, Ms. Anuranjita Kumar. She has more than 25 years of HR leadership experience at top global firms like RBS, Citi, and P&G. In her latest avatar, she is currently the managing director of IndusCap Ventures and chairwoman of WIT India. That's not it. She is also a highly acclaimed author of two of the most phenomenal books. This session is about the transformation in people management in a post lockdown world. And there can be no better person in the country to address this than Ms. Anuranjita Kumar. This session will be particularly useful to all the corporate partners and friends in the HR fraternity. I welcome you, ma'am. To everyone listening, thank you for once again for joining the session. The flow of the session includes an address by Ms. Anuranjita Kumar and followed by questions and answers. Please keep asking your questions as the session goes by. And once the session is about to end, we'll just take your questions and ma'am will be answering the questions. Without further ado, I welcome Ms. Anuranjita and ma'am on to you.
Of what I really need to do today to keep up with it. But thank you for that really warm welcome. It's always good to be with the fraternity, with a lot of you out there who are battling the COVID crisis for your organizations, be it as an HR person or also as an employee or as an employer. So I'll try and make this a little broad based from a people perspective because I think to start with, when we talk about people agenda, people strategy, it's not in the purview of just HR. HR is a facilitator, it's an enabler, but it's not necessarily just an owner. Ownership of people agenda is always a collective one between the business, different stakeholders, and of course HR. So with that as a context, I thought what might be helpful is to first of all understand what's really going on and excuse me, and with plenty of webinars on COVID, I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of the crisis and what it entails in the future. But I think from my point of view, it's one of those unprecedented crises which has overshadowed a dot-com bust that I've been a part of, or a global financial crisis that I've been a part of. But what it has given all of us an opportunity, and especially especially people like me who had the experience to be part of another crisis, be on the edge in one of those, is to try and redeploy learnings from that crisis to this one. So, which is what I will bring forward in this session. But I think when there is a crisis like this, first of all, leaders need to drive an integrated response when we navigate a crisis like this. And it's not just duty of corporates, but it's the duty of health, political, social, and also business leaders to navigate through this crisis. It's really a complex interplay of the epidemic progression, how the medical is responding, the government action, the various sector impacts, and the company actions and how they are playing out jointly. So let's try and find answers that shape opinions to navigate the crisis in this environment. And we'll try and encourage our thinking as we talk together in this session to see, how can we make this adversity an opportunity for ourselves? Because, when there is something which is so uncharted, then, we can do anything because there are no rules to the game. Now, going into the economic scenario, I think for the corporates, lots has been talked about whether, the economy will recover in a V shape, which is soon becoming a reality of the past, which meant like we crash down and we will boom up, not happening in a hurry. Will it be a slow comeback? U shape? I think 50-50 jury out there, because the more we have gotten ourselves in terms of the duration of this crisis, we do realize that this is going to have a long tail end across different sectors. And also consumer behavior and supply chain as well. But you never know. If a vaccine is found tomorrow, there might be a comeback faster than we expect. Is it a protracted challenge, which means it'll be L-shaped? Maybe. I don't want to be pessimistic, but I think we have to be ready with that scenario. I think what's going to happen in these different economic scenarios, countries which took a swift action, which would be like the US, possibly India, they enforce strict adherence to what the guidelines were, will be on a faster recovery path. Business impact is usually determined by demand shocks or supply shocks, as well as supply chain disruptions. So they will be better positioned to hold that together. Consumer behavior has changed towards how they look at their own savings. Will you and I spend my money on discretionary spend anymore? Probably the answer is no. One, there are no avenues to spend that. We're not allowed to go for holidays, we're not allowed to travel. And also because we don't know what the future of employment will hold, we're going to try and hold on to our money, which then has a consequent impact on how different sectors will behave. So let me give you my view, and this is from all the reports that I keep reading, from the different top consulting firms, or I would say, the big fours. But there would be three categories that I would put different sectors in. So the first one being, which are the healthy sectors? So HR or employees or employers in this sector probably have a little less to worry about. And these, no surprises, would be anything which is essential: food, staples for retail, household products, pharma, telco. We are on this lovely YouTube Zoom call, networks, and of course the beverages and the food industry. So these are sectors which will continue to grow and probably will have less distress, because consumer demand and behavior is not going to change, which then has a consequent impact on the employment and what we do as HR professionals. Which are the pressured sector, which means they will contract slightly, or they may be under huge pressure, or probably slightly more pressure than the healthiest sector on financials. Could be utilities, could be health equipment, could be some of the software services, not entirely everything, but I would think I would put BPO, KPO in that category, because BPO, KPOs are so they are so well leveraged with what is happening globally. And if US is down and Europe is down, then that's consequently going to have an impact on that industry. Professional services, capital goods, financials, and possibly transport. And what I mean is auto and some of the other transport services that we use. Which are vulnerable sectors? I think no. Again, you can guess that real estate, because a lot of people would want to work from home. Offices are planning to continue this whole working from home conundrum till now for a long time, and they think it makes sense. So real estate, auto, hospitality, restaurants, retailing. In some phases, I would say insurance probably is more pressured. Banks, because NPAs or credit cost is going to rise. So that's to give you a sense of what some of the research is projecting is going to happen in different sectors. Now let's come to what's going to happen to employees, and consequently, what do we do in HR? Employees, well, a lot of employees are nervous because everybody knows that the companies are under pressure on cost, and as much as the next few months will get tided over, because governments across the world are lobbying to not do any restructurings and continue pay as is. The reality is that that's not sustainable, because companies will run out of coffers. So there will be some kind of reorganization which you can expect to see on the horizon by end of this year, not earlier, hopefully not earlier than that. So it gives us time from now till then to decide what our people agenda is going to be. So I look at it from two points of view. If I was a corporate HR, or I was working on a people agenda as a part of large management team, what will be important for me is, how do I keep company afloat? How do I make sure I keep the right talent engaged? How do I, because let me qualify, whatever good times or bad time, great talent will always be marketable, will always be hireable. So in distressful times, you may run the risk of losing people who are really good, because they will be in demand. So one is my high potential and my leadership talent, then my backbone talent. So not everybody's high potential, but to keep a machinery running, I need to have a broader employee engagement strategy. And then third, looking at metrics of performance and productivity. If I have people on low performance and low productivity, you know what the answer is. And so, coming back to from a corporate perspective, how do we engage with people? How do we enable them? How do we empower them? Will be a big one. Because what held us good just a couple of months back may not hold us good, post COVID. And in my terminology, and I repeated this in some of these other sessions, life has changed a bit. It's like BC has become before COVID and AD has become after the death of COVID. So life has changed a bit. And so after the death of COVID, what do we see as employers or as corporate HR is remote working is here to stay. So from an engagement perspective, how are you going to engage with employees who are now working all over the place, right? How do you do those virtual meetings where there is that human connect, which you are able to develop one-on-one or in teams? How do you have virtual town halls and create that same impact that you could do when you got a bunch of people together? So I think engagement strategy would be a big one, and I would highly encourage for HR teams or leadership teams and corporates to start looking at that starting now, if they haven't already started to do that, because that's going to be the reality. I mean, I saw an announcement from TCS where Mr. Gopinath said, this crisis has taught him that he doesn't need more than 25% of 350,000 TCS employees in office, right? Which means for my good friend or good friends in HR there, how are they going to keep the fabric of that company, the culture of the company going? For example, onboarding online, inducting people online, making them feel they're part of a virtual organization, which is actually real. It may sound a little, I would say, a bit oxymoron, but a virtual reality, literally living through it. And those are innovations or creative ways of thinking we need to do. And if we do need to redeploy VR or something like that, we should start thinking about it now, because that's going to happen. So, one is the whole engagement focus, which clearly is something which is going to be really important. Second is, how do you enable people? How do you skill them? And lately we've seen lots of not just webinars, but mentoring and skilling, and a lot of companies are trying to get into that space. There is a bit of nervousness that how this will work. School, colleges, everybody's going online, right? So, how do we make online learning really effective? I think in the past, if I can really lay down the stats, 75% of the learning happened on the job, perhaps 20% happened in a classroom, and balance was online. And what you're about to witness is that ratio changing dramatically. Will all online learning be free? No, because when there is a true valuable learning, there is a price to it. And I'm not meaning monetarily, but somebody's invested that time in it. But I think online is going to become norm, and the innovative and creative ways of doing online learnings will be important, which make you feel connected. I'm a big one on connection, and I have two children who are right now on online education, because one is in the US, so she keeps up late at night because her college runs at that hour. And my son is studying online as well, and he's in a critical year of 12th. But if I was to give them a choice to go back to school, they would run back, because there is something about that social interaction which they are truly missing. And one of the things that has prompted in my head is, how do we create that for them? Because it's not easy. And these are kids who are 21 and 16, so they are whatever generation alpha, beta, Z, whatever you might call them. This is their feedback. So there is something, some blended learning of online and social learning, which needs to start coming together, and we need to bring it into the corporates for employee development as well. So enablement will be a big one. And if I can infer well on it, there will be enablement which is on know-how, right? Those things are easier done, done, in virtually or online, because it's like reading a book. It's the softer skills. Learning that online becomes tough. So I think those are things we need to start thinking about as HR or as corporates, to make sure we are really bracing for the impact of the future, lest we might have a population which is not fully equipped to brace the challenges of a new way of working. And the third one is empowerment, is about feeling that I'm fully equipped. And I think in some ways, if you're kind of engaging with them in the right manner, you're skilling them in the right manner, they should feel empowered. Empowered is a very big word. And I would say anybody on this call, just pause and reflect when you really felt empowered to do something. You felt there were no holds bars. You felt that you could change the world. It's that feeling that we need to be able to create for our employees, because a lot of them are working virtually on their own. But your dependency as an organization is on these virtual employees to move the business agenda together. So they are virtual, they are flexi, they should feel empowered to come up with new solutions, new tools in an empowered manner. How do you make somebody feel empowered online? I don't know the real answer, but all I can share is, if I'm doing that with the team, it's simple conversations like this, right? But when you're dealing with thousands of employees, how do you do that? So how the leadership sets the tone will be very important. And what HR teams can do is propagate that whole inclusive leadership. And I'm a big fan of inclusive leadership, because I think in times like this, the inclusion agenda is extremely important. So leaders who actually listen, who are empathetic, who are taking diverse perspective of different kinds of employees, men, women, Southern Indian, Northern Indian, whatever. Diversity is extremely important. Tend to make people feel empowered. They make them feel included, and that's a huge energizer to drive an agenda forward. So I think that would be a big one. From a employee perspective, and if I was their HR, what would I be telling them? Well, I'll be telling them three things as a HR person to focus on. One is you got to be really agile, right? And agile doesn't mean run fast. It means agile in your mindset. And when you've kind of adopted a certain way of learning, a certain way of doing things, be ready to discard that and move on to a new way of doing things, because that might be demand of the future. What happens is, as an employee or as somebody like me, I mean, I've worked for 26 odd years, and you get so embedded in your ways of doing things because it's worked for you in the past. And that's where we lose our agility, when we become prisoners of our past successes. One of my bosses told me that, success is great, but failure is better, because it helps you break the mold and makes you do different things. You should just be ready how you handle that failure and make it a success. So I think being agile is extremely important, and your reorientation to a new world, a new way of being would be important. So, for example, if you're in a retail business, how if you're a sales force, you have to manage a sales field manager. How are you going to manage them? How are you going to tell that TSI who's sitting in a tier 2, tier 3 city about, how he has to go about it? So those are things you will have to train, groom. But before you groom your teams, you will have to be agile. You will have to, embrace that and set for yourself what the new operating model will be, depending on which industry you are coming from. The second thing I would say is adapt. Okay, because the change, when there is a change, you can fight the change. It's a tsunami, and it's going to consume you. So sometimes do a reality check about how big is this change. So again, if I was to pause, when COVID hit in China, everybody said, it's limited to China. When it hit in UK, top bureaucrats in UK said not a big deal, and we know where UK is. When it hit US, we know where it went. When it kind of came into India, we went into extreme lockdown, which thankfully was the right strategy, by the way. Now the challenge is, at least for me, when we went into lockdown, and reflecting back, I genuinely believe I thought teen char hafte mein we should be okay, right? We should kind of get out, and we started planning our work and projects around that 4 week time frame. 2-3 weeks into the lockdown, we realized it's not going to happen like that. It's probably here longer. So the lockdown got extended, and we realized when the lockdown is lifted on May 3rd, we're probably not asking our teams to come back till June, and the tail end for us and our clients are going to exist for a longer period of time. When that reality struck us, we started moving. So we adapted to the new normal, and we became agile, and we started working on different products or a different set of investee companies to make sure we were fulfilling a customer need. And when we move, the third A, I would say, agile, adapt, accelerate. When you move quickly. And especially when, as an employee, you're trying to adapt to a new normal, and especially if you're a frontline staff and you're addressing consumer need, the cycle or go to market cycle time in today's market is really, really less. In the good old world where a market launch could take a few months, today, we are investing in a few tech companies, we're talking of a few weeks. So when I say agility, adaptability, and acceleration, the world has changed forever in terms of how we will get products out, what our go-to-market strategy is going to be, how are we going to engage with the clients, how are we going to co-create. And we are learning by doing. So I almost feel as an employee or as a partner to another company that the car is running and we're changing the tires. It's exciting, but it's also a little scary because we haven't done that very often. But for people like me, if there's one thing which keeps me going is continuous learning, and I'm learning. I'm learning just a new way of being, like many of you. And coming back to the HR folks, couple of my advices from the crisis that I have handled. I'll just talk about the global financial crisis. This was when I was with one of the multinational banks, and based out of Europe. I was working as a part of corporate investment bank. It was really tough, and I'll tell you, going back to this whole acceptance of change. 2007, I was sitting in Canary Wharf. The crisis was setting in, and we were in denial. Ki, nahi, nahi, ye to ho hi nahi sakta. The financial markets were booming. Everybody was happy. Everybody was getting paid well. So in 2007, when I was doing bonuses, we didn't have cash. So a lot of our compensation that year was given out in equities. As most of you know, most senior bankers prefer cash because it has more value. But anyway, and I told my investment banking boss, I said, well, people won't be happy about this. And I hope it gets better next year, which is 2008. And it's quite funny. I remember that conversation so clearly in my head. And he turned at me, and he was one of the best M&A bankers in the continent. And he said, Anu, you know what? I don't know. I reckon it's going to take longer than 12 months for this to get back to normal. And I said, how long do you think it would take? And he said, well, if in 10 years we get back to where we were or where we are today, it would be a blessing. So that was 2008, 2007. We're in 2020, and financial markets are nowhere close to where they were pre the financial crisis, right? Maybe that was a bit of a bubble. But the point I'm trying to do is there was a crystal gazing. Did we know during the financial crisis what's going to happen? No. And I'll tell you, when we went into a spiral and the company shot down from 100 odd billion market cap to a 10 billion market cap, did we know what was going to happen next? No. All I know is that I could lose my job any point of time, right? What did I do? I just kept my head up and I kept working, because that's resilience. And when you go through a dark tunnel, you just keep going. And as an HR person, it was really painful because I was going through restructurings after restructurings, massive ones like 100 million, 200 million, shutting down countries, shutting down businesses, knowing very well that my job is also at risk. Because finally, if there is no business employees, what is an HR person going to be able to do? But for the fear of dying, you do not stop living, and you keep doing what is expected of you in that moment, in that hour. and stop worrying about the consequences that it may have for you as an HR professional. And having been there myself, I know that crosses our mind very often. So for us, post the GFC, we kept, the part of the business that I was working with completely tanked. We were back in the market 2 3 years after that, trying to rebuild, resurrect global markets and investment banking. A lot of people used to ask me, yeah, why do you work for that business or that bank? Because it's tanked. You should go and find another job. I didn't, because I just couldn't. I thought it was call of duty. I mean, I don't want to leave a ship that I had been a part of so long. So I hung around with a very, very core team, which helped steer the ship back to safety. Right? It's a bit of a Titanic. We had to steer it back to safety. And I tell you what, in 26 years of my experience, if there is one stint which taught me a lot more about life and what is the best out of me, it was that. And there was nothing I would do differently if that crisis were to recur again and I had a complete amnesia what I had done at that point of time. My learnings from that crisis was that, optimism is key. You have to believe this will get better because, it will, and it has to. There is no other option we are playing with right now. So you may anticipate the worst and you put in your best, but that's how life is. Second is, believe in yourself as well, because if you don't, nobody else will. And I think that's a big confidence booster when you're going through this. You're formulating new plans. People around you maybe will challenge you, question you, be cynical around what you're suggesting. But if you believe for all the right reasons this will work, right, persist, be resilient about it. Third was, don't put yourself into a boundary as a leader or as a HR professional. In times of crisis, boundaries fizzle. There is no more HR and there is no more business. You're part of one big team, which is again steering that Titanic off from that iceberg, which you don't want it to crash into. Right? So you have to be part of a larger team. You have to understand the challenges. In times like this, if you have to prioritize what will turn that ship. There might be some tactical stuff, some low hanging stuff, because your business will be under pressure, but there will be things which will have to be thought mid-term to long term. Right? What that means is that these are the times where you do not let your business head go off their or let their eyes off the ball on things like development, on things like inclusion. When there are crises, and especially of this kind, which will suddenly now becoming a economic crisis, the first things which go out of the window is travel, which by the way anyway is not happening. Then it will be training, which will be limited. Then it will be hiring. Then it will be all the other softer stuff around inclusion, blah 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 blah. So all of you know that. How do you make sure that business continues to understand this? And there's probably just one experience that I can share with you, is that weave it with a business agenda. So you don't do training for the sake of training, you don't do hiring for the sake of hiring, and you don't do inclusion for the sake of inclusion. It has to be a business case. That's the only reason your business heads would buy this from you. So that's what I would recommend. And excuse me. What I would say is, if you take, for example, inclusion, which I feel quite passionately about, I won't push DNI. I won't just push a gender ratio because I think it's a good thing to do. I would do it because I think there are certain skill set, there's certain perspective which both men and women together can bring to the table, which may actually lead to better products, better sales, better market penetration. You might be missing opportunities which you have never seen. And it's a bit like you don't know what you don't know. So I would tie it up with a business case, I would tie it up with commercials, and that would keep you afloat, not in the short term, but hopefully in the mid to long term, because your business will bounce back. So I think going back to how you devise or strategize your people agenda around what your core drivers of your companies are very, very important. I think execution is key, because sometimes we may strategize, but how you tie up the execution across different parts of your business would be important. And finally, there has to be an ROI on human capital. How do you assess and measure that would be important. And I know that, all of you, some of you who might be working in HR would have heard that debate multiple times. It's very simple. It's, ROI on human capital is what's my expense on salary and whatever other operating costs are versus revenue or profitability, whichever unit cost you look at. And if that's a negative, it doesn't really work, right? So one of the things will have to go, which is either you reduce your human capital cost or you increase your revenue. I'm a great believer of let's push the top line up and make sure we have the right skill set. And it's easier said than done, but it is certainly possible. Um, and as we kind of tread through the crisis, in life, what tends to happen is, life doesn't get any easier. It makes us stronger. So if we keep a positive mindset, if we keep a focus on what are the key priorities, top 3, top 4, top 5, whatever may be right for you, if we believe that we have the right skill sets, and then I think it starts to come in together. From my point of view, if you have a mix of capability, the right competence, and a sense of compassion and courage towards your employee, it kind of blooms into a bit of a magic. And I've seen that happening through hopefully the dot-com crisis, and I saw that happening in the financial crisis. So I do hope that some of you will experiment with that, and that does hold you better in the crisis to come. As far as current times are concerned, I would say hang in there. What doesn't kill you always makes you stronger. So I'm going to pause there and invite Neha with any questions she might have or she might have received online.
Sure, ma'am. So I'll be reading out the questions to you now.
Yeah.
The first question is from Disha Bhardwaj. And what she asks is, will work from home become the preferred mode post COVID-19, given that the companies can save a lot of capital?
Yes, I do think that, I don't know preferred, but there will certainly be a huge shift from in-office working to working remotely for two reasons. One is because in the past, there was a certain amount of cynicism associated with productivity of working from home within certain organizations. Also, at the employee end, not everybody was clear what are the work ethics of working from home. What COVID crisis has taught us is that you can be hugely productive working from home, and working from home is really, it is really working from home. It isn't about, flexi working at times. So I think it'll be a huge game changer. I can't really pinpoint a percentage, but I would put a balance of 50-50 quite easily. There are some jobs which have to be done in office. So if I was to correlate that back to financial services, which is where I come from, for example, trading jobs, for regulatory reasons, will be back in office. But does an operations job have to be back in office? Don't know. Depends on the regulatory constraints. But can a marketing job be done from home? Yes. Can an HR job be done from home? Again, it depends how, but can be done. So yes, there will be, there will have to be analytics around how which jobs are, effective. But I see a huge change happening from where we were pre the crisis to post the crisis. And I would think you will at least minimum have 50-50. Companies will be net gainers because they reduce the real estate costs. So, for them, this will add to their savings as well in some ways.
Thank you for your answer, ma'am. So the next question is from Sumit Panwar. And what he asks is, how will things change from a recruiter, from a corporate HR point of view, and an agency recruiter point of view, post lockdown and COVID phase? And what he says is he's into healthcare industry.
Hmm. So, look, recruiting, there are two parts. I think in the short term, if you're in the healthcare industry, you probably will have a lot to do, is my own view, given that it's one of the more stronger sectors and there is a huge need. So if you're in healthcare, I think the volume of work will be buoyant. And in a recruiting job, whether you work from home or you work in office, is pretty agnostic, because recruiting in that sense has been happening virtually even pre the crisis. But I think from a healthcare recruiting sector point of view, um, the focus probably would be on, how do you get more skilled employee, because the demand in that sector has multiplied. And that's something I think you will have to think for more proactively, and tie up with probably companies which are doing skilling in this sector to feed in your entry level talent quickly. Mid to senior, unfortunately, will be from the market. And when the demand is high and the supply is short, it takes a toll on compensation, naturally so. So those are things you will have to figure out. Assessments, criteria for hiring will probably get revisited, because even demands from the health sector under high pressure have multiplied. So it isn't a sector which was moving at a certain pace, it's moving at a manifold pace. So I think one is the sourcing bit. Where are you sourcing? How are you sourcing? How are you skilling quickly to keep up with the demand? Second is, how are you identifying your talent, which is the assessment process? Because again, the agility, adaptability, and acceleration will become very important. So those were, a couple of things that I would focus on if I were you.
Thank you for your answer, ma'am. So the next question is from Kushbu Gupta. And what she's asking is, what's your message for campus hires starting this year? Students with offers that are revoked. How can they remain resilient and relevant?
Yeah, I really feel for them, Kushbu, given what's going around in the market right now. But, I've actually been on a couple of groups where a lot of kids have said, their internships have got cancelled or their offers have got cancelled. And my advice to them is, use this year to get learning from wherever you can get. So, as much as some of the big corporates may not be hiring, but the SME and SME may hire, or you can actually also do some pro bono work to ensure that you're in the market and you're learning. So, for example, for a lot of our investee companies, we've been rolling out projects and internships, and we obviously giving a stipend, but that'll not be a mark to market at this point of time, purely because we're also doing to help out the community. So there are those sectors. I think when you're looking at SME and MSME, look at the ones which are capitalized right now. And it's not that the whole industry is impacted. Yes, they're impacted, but the good ones, especially the ones in tech, are well capitalized. So I would go in there if I were a campus hire, and do a 1 year project or a 1 year stint to make sure I stay buoyant in terms of my learning. I would also pitch for cross-border assignments, and some of the people that I have been mentoring, I've been kind of getting them connected, because now with the COVID situation, nothing matters. You actually don't need a visa to do some work for a US company or a UK company. And what's happening is a lot of those companies are under lockdown completely. So there are people not available to do work. So there is work which will finally get centered once these countries are up, but currently they are looking for more support. So there are a lot of those projects and assignments which are flourishing. I would just tell the new batch which is passing out of MBA colleges or from grad colleges is, it's a great opportunity to acquire resilience. It's not what you were taught in an MBA classroom. This is reality. And these things happen hopefully once in a lifetime. Try and see what you can do to make sure your learning stays on track. The other thing to focus on is do some community and social work. It's a great place to be in. So if I was hiring people a year from now, let's say from the batch which is passed out this year, what would I be looking for? I would look for, how have you kept yourself afloat, right, at this point of time, and what have you acquired during this period where actually commercial work was much lesser. What did you do for a larger cause, because the whole human species is under risk. So did you do any social or community work? How entrepreneurial were you at this point of time in your life to go and seek opportunities out there? So opportunities are out there, but what has happened is in a lot of these schools, we've had beautiful placement processes. So we are so used to opportunities coming to us rather than we going out and hunting for those opportunities. So all you girls and guys there are opportunities. They may not be at the price points you want. They may not always be the snazzy banks or consulting firms that you would have aspired to work with. It's your opportunity to go and try out something new. The world will turn around. In a career of 30 or 40 years, this is year one. You have another, if you're working for 40 years, you have another 39 years to go. So everything levels out in the end. But use this opportunity to embrace learning and make the most of where you see an opportunity, be entrepreneurial. That's what I would say.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Ashutosh Goswami. The corporate world is talking about upskilling. For an HR professional, what are the key areas they should focus on? Are there any courses or certifications that are recommended by you?
Is the question from Ashutosh about HR or is it generic skills?
So, Ashutosh seems to be an HR professional and he's asking from that point of view.
Okay. So, Ashutosh, my advice to you would be that, HR is not a specialist function. We are a bit like we maximize our impact when we have an idea about the various things, various diverse things, which may be more topical. So, the skill or technical know-how that I would highly encourage you to acquire is technology. And the reason I'm saying it because I'm doing it myself and I do a lot of these courses. I think it's a really good time because everybody out there is giving you so much of free, great content. So I've enrolled myself into multiple contents and trying to figure my way out from AI, ML, cloud computing, because these are going to be core skills. It would be actually not just HR, tech, or marketing. We all need to know about it because this is going to be the new future. So I would acquire skills beyond HR to make myself a more holistic person. Within HR, it depends on which life stage you are in terms of your work experience. But another skill I would urge you to look at is coaching, because as HR people or HR professionals of the future, and given that remote working is going to be a reality, and going back to my point about how you connect and how you engage, coaching skills even for you as an HR professionals would be very important, because you see people less. So you have to engage in the right way. And coaching, apart from telling you the various models which exist, it also helps you develop yourself. So every time I've entered a coaching course, it's a lot of introspection, and I try to find myself before I can actually coach somebody else. And finally it makes us a better person, which finally makes us a better human being. So I think being a great person and a great professional, it will help you, in what you do every day, whether personally or professionally. So coaching is another skill which I would recommend from a softer skill point of view.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next question is by Nisha Sekhri. And what she says is it's difficult for HR business partners to engage and motivate colleagues in such situations. Could you suggest some of the tips to handle the situation?
Well, motivate colleagues in, I'm assuming, current situation when we're all locked down and working from home. I would say, in current times, over communication is not a bad thing. And there are office conversations and there are informal conversations. Continue to do that. I think when there is uncertainty, people tend to get more anxious because they don't know what the future holds. Think about how you can position that uncertainty into a possibility, which we talked about. So when everything is uncertain, it basically means anything is possible for us to do. So I would say, when you are working with your colleagues, when you're motivating them to keep at work, keep the focus, it's important to engage and connecting what they're doing to a larger reality of where the organization is headed. Make them feel engaged, make them feel enabled, make them feel included and empowered. The more people feel included, the safer they feel. So it's a bit like a Maslow hierarchy need, right? So your physical, biological needs have been met. You're at home, you're eating, you're drinking, you are sleeping. The next is, security. And this is what may be in question at this point of time. So it needs addressing. And as much as we as HR professionals may not necessarily know what the future may hold, but what we can reinforce is future will be positive. And this is like, you think positive and positive things happen. A connect between the larger agenda is always important. So when I'm talking to my teams, we have a call at 10:30 a.m. every morning where we reconnect, we kind of talk through what each one of us is doing. It's a quick 45-minute call, but it's important for all the partners and team to get together and saying, okay, what's going on for the day, what's bothering you, where are we, okay, and if somebody brings up something, we're on the call, we're able to answer it right away. And these quick ones really help because it's kept the momentum going to the extent now most of us look forward to that 10:30 call. We've been doing things like virtual, I mean, like a Friday evening drink, okay, virtual drinks, a virtual coffee. If that's going to become the norm, let's try and enjoy it. The emotions are yet there and they do flow out virtually as well. So I would say team connects, informal, formal, tying up with organization goals. If the insecurity is about the job, then being clear about the performance measures, even at this point of time, will hopefully keep the team on the path, keep them engaged, and hopefully keep them motivated.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Win John. Working from home, how do we find the accountability and quality? And does that also depend on the type of work?
So I think working from home can't change the accountability because, um, there is a certain job description, there are certain goals you're holding any employee accountable towards, whether they work virtually or whether they work physically, right? And I think, if you set the right milestone, it's a bit like what you're doing, how much are you going to do, and by when. If that metric is clear, accountability will be clear to the employees. So, and they will not necessarily be able to run away. Sometimes I've heard challenges about how you coordinate different sets of employees. This comes usually from team lead, team managers. I have a tech guy who's constantly complaining, saying, I have these bunch of 20 coders, they're sitting in different places. It's really difficult. My version controls are not working. And the question I asked him is, how are you tracking it? And what I realized is that he was falling back on his old ways of doing when he was in office and those 20 were sitting around him. He would walk around because he's nice, happy, social guy. And his way of connecting with his team was largely by just chit chatting. That's not going to work. And it's really painful when you put everything on a spreadsheet and you say, okay, who's doing which part of the work and how they're going to do it, and not making it too mechanical, but providing that bit of clarity will hopefully will hopefully hold employees accountable towards what they're doing. Neha, I missed the second part of the question.
So the second part was, does the type of the job matter in the situation?
I mean, it actually, well, it shouldn't, is my initial answer. But then if I'm just thinking it aloud, it may have varied impacts. So, for example, when we're talking about technology, we're saying if you have clarity, it probably matters less, right? But if you're talking about HR, our jobs, right, it may not be that easy because we're yet figuring out what is the right way of doing it. So if you have had, for example, training and you're moving it to online, how are you doing it is yet being sorted, leave alone by when it would be done. Because if your mode of training has been, largely classroom and not online, it'll take some time to sort that out. If in HR, say for example, you're driving rewards, relatively easy because less client facing. If you're a HR BP, you kind of yet figuring out कि employee engagement कैसे होगा, right? Things which I could do in a business meeting or a huddle, now I'm doing virtually, even though Zoom and Microsoft Teams is very good. But most people tell me it's not the same sitting in one room and talking to employees together. We are not able to coordinate that as effectively. So I think it should positively help. We're all learning, Ashutosh, and we're figuring out what's the right way of doing it. I suspect there will be variations depending on how much client facing a job is and how much, and a degree of how much it is not. And if it's less client facing, then maybe it becomes a little easier. But if it's more client facing and more so the end consumer, it becomes tougher.
Thank you, ma'am. So the next question is from Santosh Susarla, and he's asking, what is the future scope of HR analytics? Will there be any considerable hiring in this domain?
Oh, there'll be plenty. So whoever asked that question, I'm looking for somebody. Um, Plenty. Because I think the more we'll work remotely, the more analytics we would need to see the behavior of our employees. So, for example, I would really benefit as a HR head to see my employee behavior online, right? Because now I can track that, by the way, much more easily than I was able to track when I was doing physical meeting. Simple stuff like who's attending what meetings, what are the questions they're asking, how we can do feedback sessions more virtually. So I think it's going to get more important as we go along. Metrics not just from a hiring or a attrition ratios, which were the two traditional metrics which HR leaders were using. I think employee behaviors, employee engagement, what's working, and we are all going into a new way of working. So I think quick testing about when we work virtually, which interventions are getting more eyeballs, which interventions are getting more participation, which one is working better with employees, what's their feedback, try a Slido, you get instant feedback. All that will have to be very important if I have to be agile, I have to accelerate, and I have to adapt to a new normal. So I think analytics will be core. I think the point is, what I would encourage you to do is tell a lot of HR leaders about how they can leverage it. Because not everybody understands the new normal fully right now, leave alone trying to see, give you feedback about how analytics can really be leveraged towards deciding how the new HR interventions and how they would be working. But net I see a huge role, and I actually think it'll become more important than it was in the past.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is by Sudhanshu Shekhar. He says, we are into recruiting business for NBFC companies. How can we keep our recruiters engaged? What could be some suggestions by you, tools or maybe programs or activities?
So one is, if it's NBFC, I would say we are going to be in a lull for a period of time, right? So it is likely that your team is feeling a little anxious right now because the volumes would be low. And unlike health sector, volumes will continue to be low, given especially what the mutual fund market is, kind of going through. So one of the things which I would recommend doing is, broadening their skill sets. So if I was their leader, I would again, broaden their skill sets in different areas, be it within HR or be it in different tech domains, whatever their areas of preference would be. So if at a point of time the volumes do not grow and they don't have enough work, you're able to cross leverage your talent in different roles as well. And I'm sure they would welcome that because that will grow them as a professional too. So, unfortunately, my friend, I don't have good news to tell you on NBFC recruiting, which is going to be hit for a while. So, broaden their skill sets, make them more rounded professionals by getting them to take courses or putting them on projects, which will hopefully preserve the talent for you. So, let's say 18 months down the line, if the market comes back, you will probably have more traction from them to come back and do the same work for you.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Ranjan Singh. He asks, what are the three key areas that a leader should focus and work on?
What are the three? Sorry, can you repeat the question?
What are the three key areas that a leader should focus and work on?
So I talked about inclusive leadership, and I think that's an important bit. But that's more how than what skills. Um, so I think what the leader should focus on is do a bit of crystal gazing with their teams, and most if they can do that with an inclusive style, that would be helpful. Um, Try new strategies in a new normal which haven't been tried before. Let go of the past, pick what works for them, and experiment with them. So I think experimentation would be the first one, because that is the need of the hour. I would say taking the team along with you will be very important given times are tough. And if a new leader needs to make a new plan happen, he or she is going to need that support. So connecting with the team on a regular basis, briefing them about what are their thoughts, where are they going. There must be, in big corporations, there's already a lot of buzz about, oh my God, what restructure is going to happen. That can really disengage employees. So I think employee engagement through connects would be extremely important. And the third area I would say would be around, I know it sounds a little repetitive, but it's important for the leader to focus on reskilling their employees as well in line of their vision. So that's what I would say the leaders have to focus on. And I would just wrap it around that this all has to aid the consumer, the end consumer that this company would be catering to. Because if that end consumer is not, engaged with the company, then none of these three work. So those would be the three things which, if I was advising a leader, I would ask them to focus on.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is from Jaydas Pawar. What about secretarial jobs? Can it be done on the work from home basis? And what will be the impact of present situation in this category?
Can they be done? Of course, they can be done, right? A secretarial job, as we all know, is often driven by who the secretarial staff is working with. It's a very close relationship, and it's a bit, they become a habit for each other. So can it be done? It can be done. In my lifetime, I've actually had assistants sitting out of London whilst I was working in another geography altogether. It's all about a relationship and trust. So there is nothing so technical about that job which can't be handled from home. So the answer would be in affirmative. And Neha, what was the second part? Sorry.
What will be the impact of the present situation in this category, in this job category?
I won't listen until and unless some senior jobs are eliminated. I don't see the category being eliminated, but there will be some senior jobs impacted. So I think there will be some impact in this category, but it isn't simply because of working from home. It is because, some of the senior leaders who may need secretarial staff, their jobs may be at risk because maybe of the skill set or maybe of what the company may be going through. And that then has a downstream impact on the secretarial job. But the nature of the secretarial job is such that it can certainly be done remotely.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question, and probably this is the last question of this session, is from Amit Sharma. And what he's asking is, which virtual technologies would you recommend to connect with people remotely in this scenario?
Well, we are on Zoom, and hopefully all the security issues are sorted as that works. I think, look, I'm an avid user right now, Microsoft Teams as well. So I don't have a preference. I usually go with whatever it works. Yesterday we were trying to do a session on Skype, and hadn't logged into Skype for a while. So I actually forgot my password. Everything really struggled. But the mediums are, virtual mediums kind of give you a very similar interface and they tend to work well. It also depends the purpose of the medium. So I think if you're having an interactive team meeting using something like a Microsoft Teams or a Google Hangout or Zoom works well. If you are doing a session or a webinar or you're doing a training, I tend to believe a webinar, Cisco webinar kind of a format works well because, if you have 100 people, you have to really be able to moderate the way Neha is moderating right now, and make sure the session is in the flow. So you have to control the communication and the moderation. So I think, look, interactive technologies are great. And I would recommend webinars or moderated discussion through Cisco web meetings for sessions and Zoom or Microsoft Teams for interactive chit chats. And house party, if you want to have a weekend drink with friends. If you haven't tried it, try it. It's good fun.
Thank you, ma'am. I would now request you to give any last words of advice or knowledge that you want to give in this session.
Look, I think, lots of questions, and I'm available on LinkedIn, Twitter, so feel free to reach out to me. Mentoring, reaching out to people really comes for me from the heart. I do feel the pain, which a lot of you may be experiencing in your organization or seeing people around you experiencing it because I've gone through it myself. But, I would just say, look, believe in yourself, keep going through that tunnel, as we said. And I will repeat and saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. May all of us come out much stronger after this crisis and let the sun shine again. Because I think you, me, everybody on this session have a legacy to build for the future generation. Let them inherit a stronger world than we did. So thank you, Neha. Wonderful being here. I hope this was helpful for some of the people on the call. And as I said, happy to continue the conversation offline as well.
Thank you, ma'am. With this, we reached the end of the session. I thank you for your valuable time that you gave here, and I'm very sure that our viewers will value and benefit greatly from this session. And thank you once again for giving us your time. And that's the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.